Hello everyone, welcome back to the Traveling Merchant. Today I'd like to do a quick tier list on all of the Godzilla media that has been released and potentially what I feel like Godzilla X Kong will be. I've not yet seen it, but from the trailers it does look pretty awesome. Um, Please like, comment, and subscribe. Share with your friends and family if you like what you see, and leave a comment if there's other things that you'd like to see that are going on with my life. I'm hoping eventually to do an update on the suit. For anyone who's new to the channel, I've been building a Godzilla suit, and I'm almost done with the body. Really, what's left is piecing all the pieces together. There are two legs, the feet, getting the tail on, and the head, and then it would just be texturing, really, and then painting. But that's a very long process, and it sure costs a lot of money. So please like, subscribe, and share with your friends so that way I can keep making videos like this. So like I said, today I'm doing a tier list over all of the Godzilla media that we know of. And starting off with the very first one here, the Godzilla 1954. Now a lot of people give this a really high rating, at least the ones that I've seen, and I'm going to follow that trend. For anyone who has not seen the original 1954 Godzilla, just know that it is not really for kids. It is a very anti-nuclear message. For anybody who doesn't know the history about it, back when the hydrogen bomb was created off the Bikini Atoll, the explosion was underestimated, to say the least. And because of that underestimation, it caused a lot of the fallout to harm a lot of the islands in the surrounding area, sailors, and including a Japanese shipping boat called the Lucky Dragon No. 5, where I believe it was 8 of its crew members were infected with not infected, they were contaminated with the fallout, and later one of them died. And so the producer at Toho at the time, I believe it's Tomiyuki Tanaka, had the idea of using that story, that the tragedy of the Lucky Dragon and its crew members, as kind of a basis for kind of a monster movie he was thinking of, because there wasn't the Toho and Japanese movie industry had been kind of in a slump in its after the war and before the war even, and so they were trying to come back up from that, and so they had this idea of doing a giant monster movie, and so they kind of got some of the ideas from a couple of sources, right? You had Godzilla, sorry, not Godzilla, good heavens, that's what this movie's about. You had King Kong, which was 1930 something off the top of my head, I can't remember, but that was a big influence for this movie, but so was The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, which was made a year earlier than this movie. Now, if anybody has watched that movie, you'll know that it's very similar, and people could make the argument that it is a ripoff. Godzilla is a ripoff of 20,000 Fathoms. But I think that, especially with the way the 1954 movie is, that it has a much darker, more straightforward message about the atomic bombs and its anti-nuclear message. Whereas Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, it did use an atomic bomb to wake the lizard, the dinosaur up, but it doesn't, it's just a giant monster movie. Whereas this one, I feel the message is a lot deeper. There's a lot more grit and tenacity, really trying to show the horrors of war, the horrors of the atomic weapons. I mean, for heaven's sakes, Godzilla's skin is supposed to represent the burn marks from victims of the atomic bomb, and so it's just nuts how they portrayed him. Now, growing up, I only ever really saw the American version of this one, and only recently was able to watch the Japanese original. And there is a big difference between the two, because the Americanized version, Godzilla King of the Monsters, it's like watching two different movies. You've got the Japanese one, which is dark, it's gritty, it's kind of depressing, and kind of hopeful towards the end, whereas Godzilla King of the Monsters, they change the whole meaning of the story. They slap in, I can't remember the American actor's name. Oh, I'll remember it later, but they slapped him in there to try, just to boost sales for American audiences and change the story to where it wasn't really anti-nuclear at all. And so you can really see, like, especially in those two takes on the movie, is how Godzilla can be a message portraying certain tragedies and things that are circumstances that are happening in the time period, or it can be just a giant monster movie person. So, like I said, I am very happy with this ranking. The original Godzilla is definitely an S tier. It should not be any lower. Yeah, I'm going to leave that there. So we're going to go on to the next year. Funny enough, because Godzilla was such a huge success. I mean, if I remember watching another YouTuber, Big Action Bill, I will leave a link to his channel in the description. He talks about how the original Godzilla, I think it sold over 8 million tickets. I could be wrong about that number, so bear with me. I haven't watched his history of Godzilla series in a minute. But he said in his findings and his research, they had sold out many times. People waited in line for hours to go watch it, circling the really famous movie theater in Tokyo at the time, like 3 times to get in to watch it. People were crammed in and sitting all over the place to watch the movie. And so it was a huge hit, right? This, and I believe it was Seven Samurai, or no, was it Seven Samurai? Yeah, it was Seven Samurai. They were the most expensive films in Japanese history at that point, and if they had not been successful, would have bankrupt Toho. And so, because they were successful, they wanted to very quickly have another turnaround and make another movie. And so, a lot of the people for the next movie were not in it. I believe they had a different director this time around, but again, I'm not sure. Let me look up my book, since I just got the Criterion collection not that long ago, and it's got a nice summary of all the movies. There we go. Got the book. Looking. Okay, there we go. Yeah, they had a different director. So in the first movie, it was directed by Ishiro Honda, and it was kind of his breakout movie. But this time, they had Motoyoshi Oda as the director, and I believe, let's see, just some notable names, because they're probably going to be brought up a lot as I do this tier list. Tomoyuki Tanaka is the producer, and I think he produced most of these movies, except for later on when he started to get a little sickly. Let's see, original story. One note is the music writer. The person who wrote the music was Akira Ifukube. You will hear that name a lot, especially because he's the one who came up with the original Godzilla theme. And I guess the other person of note is the special effects director, Eiji Tsuburaya, which is also a big name because he went on to form his own company, Tsuburaya Productions, which is most well known for the Ultraman series. So after the success of the first movie, they wanted to very quickly make a second one to kind of bank off of the success of the first one. And so we get Godzilla Raids again. By that point, I think, according to Big Action Bill's history of YouTube videos, he talks about how they they had such a fast turnaround. Like it was like 6 or 8 months after the first one came out, this one came out. So you could definitely tell there was a dip in quality. They didn't have the same director. I don't even know if they had the same guy who wrote the music. Let me see. Let's see. Yeah, they didn't even have the same. They didn't even have Akira Ifukube to write it. They had Masaru Sato. But at least they did get Eiji Tsuburaya to do the special effects work. Um, and you can definitely tell watching this movie, it has a dip in quality. The story's slightly lighter. The message is not as anti-nuclear. Um, but I do appreciate that it was one of the first of its kind to bring two a versus type match to the screen, which would later, become a staple of the Godzilla series. And so this is the first time Anguirus shows up. You got Godzilla, and what's interesting about just a little snippet about the filming of the fight scenes against with Anguirus and Godzilla is that the frame rate was accidentally put on the wrong speed, and so it looks like they're fighting almost like animals, and so it's a little fast. It's a little like watching literally lions go at it, or oh, what else? Yeah, like basically lions going at it really, really fast, and that's a little different compared to the original Godzilla, where they had slowed down the frame rate to make it look like he was much slower, much heavier, much bigger, and to give that illusion of him being gigantic. So overall, my opinion of this movie is that there are some parts that I really, really like about it. There are some parts I can definitely tell that they rushed this production. I think um, the they were still using hand puppets in some of it. Like when you first see Godzilla in the 1954, he kind of pops his head up over the hill, and that's the first time you see him, and that was a hand puppet, and for some reason that worked okay for that movie. But when they try using the hand puppets in Godzilla Raids Again, it's a little rough, and you can definitely tell that they probably shouldn't have. They should have just stuck with the suits. But I'm sure there's production and other issues that come into play and why they made those kind of decisions. But overall, I like the story. I like the lighter-ish tone. I like, again, probably the fights are my favorite. Um, I do have to say, the most boring part about it was that they had this great idea. One of the, for spoilers for anybody who hasn't seen it, one of the guys who is helping to try to bury Godzilla has this idea, hey, if I crash my plane into the mountain, we can bury him in ice. But all of a sudden, like, dead stops after they see that, and they have to go refuel and replan on how to do it when they could have just cut that part out and just kept blasting the mountain until Godzilla was buried. So that, other than that, I think the story's fine. You can definitely tell it's dip in quality. Where would I put this? I think I would probably safely say that this is either a B or C tier. I think for now, I'm going to put it in C, maybe B. We'll put it in C for now. And then that may adjust later. And this is mostly just because it's not like as good as the first. You can definitely tell there's a dip in quality. Story is not as poignant. But it's still good. So maybe what, I'm going to say B. We're going to say B. B is fair. B is pretty fair for this one. And now we're going to move on to the next movie, which actually took several years before they got to, because by that point they had started making other monster movies, such as, I believe, Rodan, Mothra, Varan, just to name a few. And by that point, especially after Rodan, they had started it stopped being in black and white, and they actually started to add color to their movies through Toho scope. And in this particular movie, Godzilla, or King Kong versus Godzilla, was made in 1962. Yes, 1962. And to this day, I believe, according to the Big Action Bill History of YouTube channel, it is still the most attended Godzilla movie ever. Um, I don't remember exactly how many tickets he said that were sold and had been, when people went to go watch it, but it was a ridiculous amount. And according to his findings, that Godzilla or Big Action Bill's findings, the the whole King Kong was the top biller. People wanted to actually see King Kong more than Godzilla, and so they made it out to be like this big old, um, like a cage fight or a boxing match, between two opposing opponents. And um, so yeah, that's just a little bit of the history behind it. Let's see. I don't have any. I believe by this point, Ishiro Honda and Akira Ifukube came back for this movie. Yeah, Japanese director Ishiro Honda. Okay, so Ishiro Honda had come back. Eiji Tsuburaya was the special effects director. Um, and I believe Akira Ifukube wrote the music again. And you can definitely tell this movie in particular, they kind of went in a different direction with it. So I had actually just watched the original version of this, the Japanese version. The only way that I know you can find it is through the Criterion collection, which finally had some reprints done. So if you go to their website, like right now, you could probably go find it and be able to watch this. It's not actually on the DVDs that are in the slipcase. It's in the bonus features. They have it in some weird hidden like subsection thingy or whatever, and you can go watch the original Japanese version of this. And I'd highly suggest you watch that version because I grew up watching the Americanized version, and it really pissed me off because as a kid they made Godzilla out to be like a really big idiot because he had a tiny brain and Kong was a much smarter animal. And I'm like, no, Godzilla's cooler than Kong, like any kid. But anywho, it was still fine. When I actually watched the Japanese version, I felt like it was much better. Um, if I were to put this on a ranking, so that we'll get that out of the way, we'll move this along a little faster because there's a lot of more movies to go through. Godzilla vs. Kong is probably one of my favorites. Um, I kind of grew up with it, kind of didn't. It was more like in passing, I would see it once in a while. And so I'd probably stick this in A, mostly because this was where we got the idea for big versus battles. I'm not saying that this wasn't, obviously the first, and there was more inspirations before that. But I'm saying this is kind of what kicked off the whole versus big icons, And I feel like A tier is pretty fair, especially if you're watching it with your kids. It's a very family friendly. Family friendly. It's kind of family friendly. If obviously, I would say you're gonna want to watch it with. If kids are gonna watch it, have parents around so they can skip some stuff, like maybe the scene where they're giving out cigarettes to islanders to try to appease them while they go just kidnap Kong. Um, Other than that, it's funny. It's kind of goofy. It's kind of campy. It's a little whimsical. A little bit of slapstick. A little bit of Charlie Chaplin, maybe, from the Japanese antagonist. Maybe a little bit of Abbott and Costello. Maybe a little bit. That kind of funny. So it's definitely you can definitely tell there was a shift between these three movies. You had the really dark, kind of gritty, down to earth, like anti-nuclear message to, okay, we're getting a little less dark, but still kind of dark, more funny, kind of actiony, more verses. Then we're really getting into the funny because the they wanted to start to appeal more towards the kids in the audiences. So I think A tier is definitely a fair place to put this movie. It's definitely not S. There's some aspects that are lacking. I'm gonna say this now. Most of my complaints with these movies the biggest of them all is that there just isn't enough monster action compared to human aspects. So a lot of times that will rank these higher or lower because I like the ones where Godzilla's more on screen than human time. But that isn't always the case, which we'll find out later when I get into some of the newer stuff. So we're going to move on to Godzilla versus Mothra. Now this one I believe came out either, let me look at my book. It'll tell me quick if it was a year or two later. That's Ebera. We'll get to you in a second. Almost. Aha, okay. So yeah, this came out about 2 years later, after Godzilla vs. King Kong, and I feel like this one definitely was kind of peak for before they turned into a little too goofy for the movies. Godzilla vs. Mothra, it was kind of serious, kind of goofy. Godzilla was still kind of seen as the bad guy, and that's kind of what all these were. Is all the previous movies is that he's still kind of the big baddie, and Mothra and like King Kong are trying to fight against him to save the world, kind of thing. And so I feel like this is definitely like peak in terms of that seriousness. But definitely not peak of the Showa era. I think it was just peak of the seriousness of the series, but that may change as we get later on into like Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla, and Godzilla versus Hedorah. But we'll talk about that later. So Godzilla versus Mothra, like I said, most of my complaints I have with these movies is sometimes it takes way too long for Godzilla to show up. I believe it almost takes half the movie for him to show up in this. So if you got kids who like this, just fast forward to the monster fights. It's fine. It's not gonna ruin anything, but the story is still pretty okay. You can definitely tell that they started using better technology for making their films. Like I believe I can't remember what the lingo is when they put Godzilla in the background, but then they cut out the city to make it look like he's walking around. And of course, back then it looked phenomenal, but nowadays it's really obvious it's kind of fake. But you got to think for 1964 time, it's pretty dang good. So I feel like this one is definitely pretty high. Do I rank it higher than Godzilla vs. King Kong? I would say no. I don't think it's higher than Godzilla vs. King Kong, simply because flying animals, and I have watched a lot of the Mothra movies. I've watched the Mothra Rebirth trilogy with Ghidorah and them fighting. It's really hard to get these live props to look very realistic as flying animals, and so some of it's interesting, some of it's a little rough, and so I feel like if I were to rank this, I'm going to move Godzilla Raids again down, and then we're going to keep this spot for Godzilla vs. Mothra. I think that is very fair to me. A lot of people, this is one of their favorites. I feel like probably my favorite scene is the one when Godzilla is waking up out of the dirt. I just think it looks cool. And then when he's destroying, I can't remember what the name of the castle is. It'll come back to me later, but definitely I think B is a pretty fair place for this. I like it a little less than Godzilla vs. Kong simply because it's a really hard thing to make the fighting with a flying monster on strings look really, really good. And all things considered, they made it look really good. It's really, really good. So it's definitely not Godzilla Raids again, for sure. So we're going to move on to the next movie we're going to rank is Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster. Now, this particular movie, as the title suggests, it's more of a Ghidorah movie than anything. This is where you can start to see Godzilla change from being a big baddie to more of a anti-hero. You know, he's doesn't really want to try to defend the Earth and save it from Ghidorah, but then eventually kind of gets coaxed into it by the Mothra larva. And And Rodan's in it too, which is fun. I definitely think that these two right here, Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster and Invasion of Astro Monster, they're kind of the same movie, so it's kind of tough. Like, I feel like these are very similar. It just depends. If you prefer more sci-fi space stuff, you'll probably like Invasion of Astro Monster better. If you don't like space stuff, then you'll probably like this one better. They're kind of the same to me. And once again, I reiterate, I have a tough time a lot of times with the human aspects because it takes way too long for the monsters to get on screen. And so I'm just going to say that one more time, and then we'll drop it so that way you know if it's not higher than what you think it should be, then that's probably why, is because there's just not a lot of monster action compared to what I feel it should be. So I'm going to probably place these two movies together because they're almost the exact same thing to me. Let's see, 1964 and 1965. Yeah. Let's see. I feel like Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, I think I've only watched it about once or twice. I'm trying to remember the story a little bit. Let's see. Yeah, see, I like the monster parts when they showed up. I remember that because Mothra tries to go fight Ghidorah on her own while Godzilla and Rodan are butting heads, and then Ghidorah kicks the crap out of Mothra until Godzilla reluctantly shows up. It's like, fine, we'll fight him, and it's tough. I feel like I think it's fair to put this one about. It's definitely higher than Raids Again, but I don't think it's quite B tier. But that's mostly because I want to give this one B tier. It's definitely the Invasion of Astro Monster is definitely lower than Mothra, but I feel like it's higher than Ghidorah, and kind of in between these two because I kind of like the space aspect of Invasion of Astro Monster a little bit better. But I may change this later. So we'll come back to those two again. I would also like to note Invasion of Astro Monster. You can definitely tell they really started to get into the more kid-friendly, goofy, whimsical. I mean, for heaven's sakes, Godzilla did a very well-known, I don't know what to call it, a happy dance. Happy dance of the time, basically pulling in pop culture for Japan at the time into its movie. And that's when it's really started, you could tell that they were becoming more kid-friendly. I just watched Ebirah Horror of the Deep, and I like Ebirah. I like it. I like the idea of it. You could definitely tell they were implying. Let's see. Yeah, they were implying this movie to be a King Kong versus Ebirah movie, but they ran out of time to renew the license because King Kong is apparently very expensive to procure. So yeah, I tried watching it again, and it drags. Like, it almost took for a movie that's only 84 minutes, it took Godzilla almost an hour to show up. And that was really rough for me, especially watching it like a second or third time. And like in this picture here, you can see Mothra's in it. Mothra's not really in the movie. She only shows up just to be, important and save the people. And then it's mostly an Ebirah movie with kind of Godzilla showing up and replacing Kong. And you can definitely tell they started to lose money by this point because they stopped doing the big budget sets with the really big scale city miniatures. They started to get into more fields, more space in Invasion of Astro Monster. In this one, they went to an island, so the sets were easier to make to save money. So I feel like this would be the first one. Ooh, that's tough. I want to say D tier for sure because this is my third time watching it and I just couldn't. It just took way too. Now, okay, hold on, let me think about this because I actually did like it when Godzilla finally showed up. That I do have to say. So maybe, do I put it higher or lower than Godzilla Rage Again? I definitely feel it's, okay, I'll do this. We'll put it in the C list right here, but it's definitely lower than Raids Again for me. It's definitely lower than Ghidorah for me. Definitely, yeah. I think that's fair. I think C, the bottom of C tier for now, is a pretty good place for Ebra. I do like the fight scenes in this very much, but that will be, I'll explain it later with another movie that I actually had growing up that a lot of you will probably be shocked that I place higher on the list than you think. But like I said, we'll get to that in a second, and I'll explain it later. So the next one is a movie which a lot of people think is one of the low points for the Showa era, and that is Son of Godzilla, which I believe came out, about a year later after Ebra. You can definitely tell they're starting to lose money. They're starting to lose ideas. They're trying to cut back on budgets, doing what they can, and to try to make it more kid-friendly, more focused on family and the people who are actually showing up to the theaters, which, of course, where the mothers and they're bringing their kids to come watch these movies. And on first watching this, especially after I had found out that I was going to have a little baby here soon, I actually found it very cute. It's very fun. It definitely did its job being more focused on the family. Now, that being said, I will I don't know whose idea it was to design poor Manila the way he was, but boy oh boy, they made him so hideous when he almost gets eaten by the Kumongas. But boy, he is so ugly. And of course, they tried making Godzilla look a little bit that way too, so that way you could tell they were related. But oh boy, the costume, Godzilla's costume, and baby Manila's costume are both really rough looking. Um, but I did like, or it wasn't Kumonga. I'm sorry, I meant to say Kamakiris. There's a Kamakiris. It's these the grasshoppers, not grasshoppers. Yeah, they're grasshoppers. Grasshoppers, whatever you want to call them. Praying mantis. There we go. It's when Manila tries to gets almost eaten by these things, and then Kumonga's kind of cool. I do like the prop they used for that and the fight with Godzilla and that. And probably my favorite part of this whole movie is the very end. For sure, is that scene where Godzilla's holding his little one as they both get frozen on the island. Where would I rank this one? I know it sounds silly, but I definitely think it's definitely higher than Ebera for me. Because you can definitely tell the focus became more family friendly. They were focused on that kind of thing, and I appreciate that, especially now that I'm becoming a dad. So I think C tier for this will be where it stays for now, and maybe I'll think about where I can move stuff later. Now to a movie that I feel could have been so much better. And a lot of people may hate me for this. That's fine. You can leave it in the comments below. But for me, Destroy All Monsters was kind of a low point. I know it sounds weird, especially considering Ebera, Son of Godzilla, and then eventually All Monsters Attack. But Destroy All Monsters, I watched it again recently, and it took almost the entire movie, okay? The entire movie for Godzilla and his friends to actually do something on screen. And some of them didn't even get screen time. Like Baragon. Poor Baragon showed up for like half a second, both in the beginning and at the very end, and for like half a second before the fight, and he wasn't even in it because by that point the suit was so old they couldn't even do anything with it, or else they'd, risk having it just completely deteriorate. Poor Varen didn't even show up for like literally, I think, a second in the whole movie. Now, I do appreciate what they were trying to do, especially because this was supposed to be the swan song. They were planning on this being the last Godzilla movie. They wanted to try to put everything they could into this. But again, where they fell short was they spent way too much dang time with the humans. Like, I would not mind human stories with these monster movies if they wrote them well. For some reason, it just took way too long for the monsters to show up. And but with the monsters that were on screen, I did appreciate. I loved the fighting. I loved Anguirus getting thrown around. I loved Mothra and Kumonga using their spiderweb and silk to try to trap Ghidorah. Um, Manda, the looks like I think it's like a Chinese dragon thing. I don't know why he wasn't more on screen. I mean, he showed up for a minute. Um, but yeah, I like I said, I like this movie, especially when the monsters show up. But there are some direction choices that are a little rough, like when they're showing the monster scenes through a TV set, which is recording the monsters attacking other cities. I think that was kind of odd. Like if they could have shown the TV set and then zoomed in to where you can actually see what's going on, that would have been smarter. But whatever. Um, I definitely feel, especially this one, I'm gonna rank this one relatively low, probably lower than what most people would do. And that's like I said, because it just felt like it took way too long for the monsters to show up. But when they did show up, they were really, really good. Uh, I think right here, definitely a little bit higher than Raids Again. Definitely below this one and definitely below this one. I think this is a fair place to put it. I may move, especially if it gets a little clumped here, I may move this guy down a little bit, but we'll see. But I think that's a fair place for Destroy All Monsters right now. Now to the movie that everyone that I've read or heard or talked about or watched videos online say that this is the start of the really low points for the Showa era, and that is All Monsters Attack. I believe, let's read, this came out a year after Destroy All Monsters. And what's interesting about this one, especially for me, is I did not have many Godzilla movies growing up. I had the 1998 version, the American version Godzilla. I had this movie we're talking about, but in the American version, Godzilla's Revenge. I had Godzilla vs. Biollante on VHS. I believe I either rented or owned Godzilla 2000 once or twice. And we had Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla on VHS. And that was it. Like, I had nothing else until, years later. Because all this stuff didn't exist, or where I was, and we didn't get these kind of movies where I lived. And so I just dealt with what I had. And honestly, All Monsters Attack, if you did not, like I did, if you did not have any context at all for how they basically use stock footage throughout the entire movie, okay, I did not know this. It still sucked me in. I liked the kid because as a kid, when I watched it, I related to him very well. Would get picked on, or was having trouble with school, or whatever. It was relatable, and you wanted to escape, right? And that's kind of the plot of the movie: is this kid escapes into his dream world to deal with his parents being both working, and he's kind of always home alone. And so he escapes into Monster Island, where he befriends Manila, who teaches him how to defend himself against bullies, right? And, you see a lot of kind of good fight scenes from the last several movies. I believe Godzilla versus, not Kumonga. Is it Kumonga? I think Kumonga's in this one. I've only seen it once or twice since recently, so correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. I believe he fights Kumonga in this one. I think he goes against Kamakiris, which are the praying mantis bugs. He goes against the flying condor. He goes up against Ebera in this, and he goes up against what is this one's name? It's the one that's like a bullfrog mixed with a cat. I just can't remember his name. What is his name? Gabara. That's right, Gabara. Um, and when he fights Gabara and Baby Godzilla fights against or Manila, I should say, fights against Gabara, it's fun. Now, I really like this movie. Okay, and a lot of people are gonna be like, "What's wrong with you? Why would you like this movie?" But you have to remember, this is nostalgia. Okay, this is what I had. This is what I watched. I had no clue they were ripping these off from other movies, and what I liked about it the most is that they basically took the best parts of those other movies and stuck it in this one. So to me, I'm gonna put it a little higher, but that's just me. Not a lot of people are gonna like that, but for me, because of my nostalgia, because of the way I grew up, this is all I had. I think it is very fair to. Do I like this one better than Mothra? See, I haven't watched it again recently. I literally have tried to rewatch these so that way I can prepare for this video, but it's been a minute. I think it definitely is in B tier. Is it better or worse? For nostalgia's sake, I think it is pretty fair. We're going to put it at the top of the B list. I think that is a very fair place. Especially because, again, my nostalgia factor. And this is kind of one of the movies that I had. This is what I had. This is what I knew as Godzilla. So we're going to move on to the next one. Now, what's interesting is I only recently saw this movie, and I can definitely see why it gets a lot of the hate it does. But I'd like to point out Big Action Bill's video. And again, I'll link his channel below. He points out that he almost relates this one to being similar to the original one, the 1954 Godzilla, and like Shin Godzilla, almost in the same kind of genre, because all of a sudden it goes from this happy, kind of goofy, kid-friendly-ish monster movies genre to back to a dark message with kind of grittier tones, spreading a humanitarian or political or what's the word, environmental message, right, against pollution and stuff. And that kind of is the theme, definitely the theme with the original Godzilla, and definitely with Shin Godzilla, and later in a couple of these other new ones, especially Godzilla Minus One. So after watching it, seeing, Godzilla, I actually like Hedorah. I like kind of the backstory behind it. It's supposed to be a she because its eyes, infamously enough are supposed to be in the shape of vaginas, which is a very weird fact. I don't know why they decided to go with that, but why not? It's definitely a 70s movie. It's a little weird. It's a little quirky. It's got some scenes where it's like, yeah, this was definitely made in the 70s. They've got like this scene where they're in a dance club, and then all of a sudden they're all wearing fish heads, and I'm like, okay, this is a little weird. But then this is like one of the movies that Godzilla shows up the most. I don't remember where I found it, but somebody did a list on like percentages of how much he's in the movie. Godzilla's in the movie, and this is like one of the movies he's in the most. And I think that's one of the reasons I rate this one higher than most, especially being an adult. And especially because it kind of goes back to more of that darker-ish. When I say ish, obviously this isn't as dark as you'd think because it's the one where he learns to fly. But if I were to rank this, let's see. If I were to rank this, I'd definitely say it's higher than All Monsters Attack for sure. I feel like I think I'm gonna move this to A for me. I feel like it's like if I were to show anybody like Godzilla movies and not have them be bored to death, I think yes. If I were gonna show them Godzilla movies and have them not be bored, it would probably be like that. I think. Yeah, yeah, yes. Yeah. Well, we might change that, but I think that's okay for now. If I were to show Godzilla movies, it'd definitely be like something like this, or maybe like that. Okay, we'll probably do that for now. And like I said, I really like Hedorah. I like that Godzilla shows up way more in this movie than he has before. But apparently, the directors, or sorry, not the directors, but the producers and the owners of Toho didn't think so. They thought, man, this director, Yoshimitsu Banno, went a little too far out of field, and they didn't like it, so they brought him back to kid-friendly and good old stock footage. And that's where we're at with Godzilla versus Gigan. This is very much like All Monsters Attack, except now, because I have watched all the other movies, you can definitely see every movie that they're cutting from. They are running out of money fast, and they are trying to skimp and save everywhere they can, and it is very apparent. Um, with Godzilla versus Gigan, I do like the fights. I do kind of like when Ghidorah shows up. I like Gigan's character. I like that they did it at night. I feel like a lot of the light scenes in a lot of the movies where they weren't doing it at night, it was a little too obvious. They were using props, and so having it be at night helped give it a little bit more of that illusion of giant monster movies, kind of hiding any mistakes that may have got on screen. And that being said, this is a very cutting stock footage, reusing like crazy. Like you're talking, I believe they reused stock footage from Ghidorah, the three-headed monster. I believe they used some from Invasion of Astro Monsters. I think, trying to remember, I think they used some from War of the Gargantuans. I mean, it's you can definitely tell that they were running way low, and so this isn't like the greatest. But if you fast forward to the monster fights, they're fine. That being said, do I like this one better or worse than Ebera? I feel like even though it's stock footage crazy, I feel like it's a little better than Ebera. A little. Um, and again, I'm ranking this one a little lower because it took way too long. Like I said, most of these would be a lot higher if the monsters had more screen time. I think that's fair. I might move that for now. I might move that later. So we'll move on to the next movie since we still have a lot more to go. Next one is very similar to the last one. This is Godzilla versus Megalon. Megalon is a very cool looking character. I think him and Gigan are a very cool duo in this. And I feel like the name of the movie is a little bit of a misnomer. Maybe that's the right word. It's more of a Jet Jaguar movie than anything. Godzilla's just there kind of to sell the movie at that point. And you can definitely tell they had run out of money by this time, and they really were focusing it on being kids, getting kids in the movie as much as possible. A lot of people feel that this is the low point, especially because some of the history behind it in 1973 or 74, I don't remember. This is what 73 was when it was made, but either a year later or so later, John Belushi went on to SNL to show this movie to the U.S. audiences on TV, and this was kind of the movie that set the attitude for the way Americans felt about Godzilla. Goofy, silly, B and or C movie, especially in this case. Not great, silly, for kids. And there are some aspects that I like about it. I like the fact that they kind of just went it is like definitely for kids. I like that they brought a character that was fan made. Jet Jaguar was made by a fan, heavily altered, obviously, but still very fun that they were including kids in the production of these movies. So, do I feel like this one is less or more than Ebera? See, it's so tough because it's like I don't mind the stock footage all that much. It's not great. That's why it's not higher, but it makes up because the monster fights are decent. So I don't know. Maybe I just have such a low opinion of this because I watched this again recently and it was a little disappointing. So I'm gonna put this one definitely next to, because these two are dang near the same movie. They're almost like a part one and part two. So I think that's fair. Where I'm gonna leave it in C, and I may move these down later, especially if it gets a little clumpy up here. For the next one, we're gonna go over the movie that I grew up having. I had this on VHS. I watched it a lot, a lot. Like we had the American versions, or at least the English dub version, and I remember a lot of the lines almost word for word, especially the way it even sounds and the way to pronounce it. Like that's how much I watched this particular movie when I was a kid. And for some nostalgia's sake, and now all that in mind, it is still by far one of my favorites of the Showa era. I love Mechagodzilla. I love all the fight scenes. I love King Caesar. King Caesar is a way cool monster. I love this design for him. It's my favorite. Blows Final Wars out of the water in looks. He looks like the Chinese dog. He's still got some fur. He's bulky. I love Mechagodzilla. The way he's designed is just on point. He looks like Godzilla, but still very mechanical. I like Godzilla's design in this too. Even though as a kid, you didn't know really, about plot devices and having it make sense. Like why was Mechagodzilla disguised as Godzilla? You didn't care as a kid. You were just like, why is Godzilla attacking everything? He's supposed to be the good guy. But of course, as a kid, you don't realize it's just they threw it in there and didn't explain why. But I didn't care. I thought it was great. Again, as a little kid, I remember thinking that the human aspects took way too dang long. But that's the way I feel mostly about these movies. But for nostalgia's sake, I'm gonna rank this pretty dang high, way higher than probably most do. If I were to show anybody a Godzilla movie, it would definitely be up here. If I were to show them any of these movies, I would be more than happy to do so. Um, some people might get really upset about this, but I'm going to do this. There. If I were to show anybody, okay, my favorite Godzilla movies that I grew up with, nostalgia based, all that jazz, it'd be these. This A tier list up here, and S. And then these ones we kind of skip over. Now, the only reason I put All Monsters Attack higher is because, like I said, it's what I grew up with. It's what I know. It's near and dear to my heart. A lot of people will probably very much disagree with that. That's fine. That's why these tier lists are fun. They're my opinion, and if you disagree, leave it in the comments. It makes it fun. But back to Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. I love this movie. I would show this to anyone who's never seen one. It's ridiculous. It's kind of serious, kind of not, kind of goofy, kind of scary. Has some scary moments, kind of doesn't. Love the team battle with King Caesar and Godzilla and stuff. There was definitely some aspects that were left out, like apparently King Caesar was supposed to be able to use his call to call other monsters to come help him, but it never really finished. So the plot isn't great. I do think one thing that it lacks is too many characters. There are way too many characters all over the place. You have to remember, there's a scientist who goes into a cave to study this thing, and there's this other scientist who does this thing, and there's this one secret agent who does this thing, and then this chick who does reporting and this thing and this. It's just too many characters, so it's hard to there's it bounces around all over the place. But they make up for it in the monster action. I think this is definitely the peak of Showa era monster action. They were able to get the lasers, the rockets, the explosions, and all that stuff. This is definitely up there. And I think it's pretty fair with all of these. Um, Moving on to the next one, Terror of Mechagodzilla. Now, for any of you who have little kids and who have been watching these, make sure that you try to watch these with them. And I'm going to recommend that parents, if you do watch Terror of Mechagodzilla with your kids, be with them. It's the first one that I've seen that actually has a very brief flash of nudity. It is literally just a woman having surgery done on the inside of her stomach to turn her into a robot. But her chest it's like not even a real chest, it's like a fake chest on top of her, to make it look like she's getting worked on by mechanical machine parts or whatever. But just fair warning for any kids who watch this with their parents or parents watching with their kids, skip past that part. And that's pretty much it. Everything else about this movie, I think that it is almost a part two to Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. It is almost the same movie, almost. I like, after watching it and comparing the two especially, I like the new direction with the camera angles, being able to see Titanosaurus as if you're looking up at him and looking up at the monsters like they're way taller. I think that was a smart move because it just kind of sucked you into the movie more. I like Titanosaurus. I still like Mechagodzilla. Still like Godzilla. I I I want to say my first impression of this, I did not like it as much as the original Mechagodzilla, but they're almost the same dang movie. Like it's almost a back to back. Like it could be a part one and part two. So it's hard for me to say that I like this better than that one. But I really like Titanosaurus. Oh, heavens. So I guess that's the question. What movies out of all of them would I want to show to somebody? I think this is definitely right about here. I think that's fair. Because I like Titanosaurus, not as much as Ghidorah, and I feel like you don't need to really watch this one to if I wanted to show, A, S, and A tiered to my friends and family. I don't think it's necessary that you watch this one, but it's also, oh, that's tough. Yeah, I think that's fair. I think it's fair where it's at because S and A tier are the ones that I would absolutely show to somebody who's never seen them before. So that's it for the show era. By this point, the ticket sales and the box office numbers had dwindled to the point where Toho put Godzilla on I believe it was a 10-year hiatus because Terror of Mechagodzilla came out in 75, and Godzilla wouldn't return until, funny enough, Godzilla returns in 1984, or at least the American version, Godzilla 1985. Now this movie, I've watched it recently. All I have to say for anyone who's trying to find these on DVD, good luck. I got lucky finding this one on Blu-ray, and it was like $50 when I bought it, and that seems like, wow, that's a lot for a movie. Yeah, well, go try looking for it now. It's closer to $200 for a Blu-ray version of this. It's astronomically insane. I don't understand why. Maybe it's because it just hasn't been reprinted except for that one, and so now it's a collector's item. But I don't know. So good luck watching it. Good luck finding it. I have no clue if there's a streaming service or anything else that would show it. But for those who have seen it, you know that this is a return to form. Godzilla's in a good chunk of the movie. The sets were bigger. At this point, he had grown in size. The story had gotten better. The what would you call it? I said the set pieces, but the miniatures got better, been more intricate. It's the ship that the military uses to fight him. The Super X. There we go. The Super X looked great. I like the return to form. I wish they would not have I wish they would not have used the giant animatronic for a lot of the close-ups on Godzilla's face, because you can definitely tell that it was a little rough. Like the animatronics wouldn't work all the time, so he'd look a little cross-eyed, a little derpy, and then sometimes it would work, and then it'd look great. So I don't know, it's a little rough. What brings this movie down more than anything for me, out of all of them, especially this Heisei era, is the fact that he's fighting a ship. It's just a little boring, especially after you've watched all of these before this point, where he fights monsters and monsters fight with him, and so him fighting a ship is kind of So if I were to put this, I almost want to make a different ranking because it's hard to, for the Heisei stuff, it's higher than some of these. I feel like A, S, and A are the ones I would show to anybody. I don't think I would necessarily show anyone. Oh, this is so hard because the Heisei series, it has its own continuity. So it's literally restarting from 1954 all the way through to Destroya. It's all one continuous story. So it's hard to try and split these up because it's like you can have it. You can watch one without the other, but some of the stuff doesn't make sense without it, so it's just tough. I think I would rank Return of Godzilla probably high B tier. I think that's a fair place for it. Now, moving on to another movie that I had growing up was Godzilla vs. Biollante. Now, as a kid, a lot of the adult themes in this movie, a lot of the story itself was lost by me. As a kid, I didn't quite understand it. I loved it when Godzilla was on screen. I loved his suit. I love the artwork for this movie, especially the front cover. It looks phenomenal. I have a whole bunch of posters from the artist who came up with a lot of the Heisei era movies, like this Godzilla vs. Mothra and Godzilla vs. Biollante one that you can see right here. He did all of them from Return of Godzilla to this one, and they're super, super cool. But anyways, that's a side rant. Godzilla vs. Biollante. As a kid, didn't quite understand it. I liked when the monster showed up. It's kind of boring otherwise. As an adult, I think it's a lot higher on my list. I love Biollante, especially in its final form. I think it looks the best in that version. I think I like the jagged, the teeth and the tentacles and the whole costume was just like Heisei to me. Like if I were to show anybody like an entire back to back of Godzilla stuff, it'd be this whole era. Heisei is probably my favorite era. Like if you're to watch just nothing else, it'd be the Heisei era for sure. At least in comparison to like Showa and Millennia and stuff. Now that being said, I'm gonna rank this one definitely probably. Is it higher? See, this is tough because it's hard to compare the Showa era stuff to this one because they're like 30 years apart, or 20 or 30 years apart between the two. So it's like, I don't know. Do I think it's better than this, Mechagodzilla? No. Do I think it's better than King Kong versus Godzilla? So I think it'll probably fall somewhere in here. Definitely A tier. These are all kind of tied right now. Honestly, they're all kind of may have to move some stuff. Honestly, let's do that. Let's move some stuff. So we're gonna move you down. Move you down. You down. You down. That's fine. Then we'll move you down. Move you down. Yeah, that'll work. Yeah, this one's so nostalgic for me. It's tough to say if I want to move it down or not. All right, well, we'll say high B stuff is also stuff I would show. It just isn't like top whatever. Um, I think, yeah, there we go. That's fine. I think that works good. So Godzilla vs. Biollante is definitely A, but a slower A because I like these other ones a little better. Cool. Moving on to the next movie, Godzilla vs. Ghidorah. I saw this, I think, once or twice now. Oh, I also forgot to mention. Back up 1 second. Godzilla vs. Biollante. Good luck finding a Blu-ray of this movie to watch. Boy, oh boy. Even the DVDs are expensive. Not even Blu-rays, but DVDs. I bought the DVD, I think it was like $60 a few years ago, and now just the DVD is like $100. And don't even get me started on the Blu-ray. Blu-rays are going for like $300 on eBay, and it makes you want to vomit. That is just disgustingly expensive. So if you have a way to access or watch this movie, do it. I do know that I believe it's Pluto TV has most of these movies on its streaming service for free. It just has ads. So if you don't have access to it otherwise, Pluto TV has most of these Godzilla movies, and I believe Godzilla vs. Biollante and all the Heisei era are on that streaming service, but don't quote me on it per se. I haven't checked in a minute. So if you can't actually afford the DVDs to own them, at least there's an option for you to go watch them. So back to Godzilla vs. Ghidorah. This movie is wackadoo. It is. There's a reason that time travel is a genre that has been overplayed and beaten over the head, and why people don't always like it that much because there's so many things that can go wrong with trying to write a time travel story. And they went all in on this one. You've got time travel, you have Terminator references, you have Alien references, you have Back to the Future references. Like, you have a reference to Steven Spielberg for some weird reason. Like, it is everywhere. This movie is nuts. I do have to say, I love the fight scenes. I love Ghidorah. I love when he turns into Mecha King Ghidorah. I like Godzilla's design still. I still think it's awesome. One downside, I think, compared to the last movie for sure, and the movie before that, is they decided to do daytime fights. And I think that does a discredit to the whole Godzilla theme in general. When you take Godzilla out of kind of that darkness, it makes it much easier to see the mistakes, the wires, how it looks like they're on a stage rather than out in a field somewhere or in the big city or whatever. So I feel like, especially because of the wackadoodleness of this movie, would I want to show it just to anybody? Would I want? Do I think it's better? Yeah, I think it's better than that one for sure. Yeah, I think that's fine. I know which ones I would actually show family for sure. It's either a B or C. That's so tough because the whole Heisei era is very kind of, well, hold on, let me think about this, because the Heisei era has too many beam battles too, and that's something that I got bored of by the end. So I think I'm going to rank this high B. I think that's pretty fair. So we're going to move on to the next movie, and that's going to be Godzilla vs. Mothra. This title is very misleading because it's really a Mothra versus Batra movie, and then Godzilla just says, "Hey, wait a minute! I'm the bad guy. I'm the evil guy, not Batra. I'm gonna go destroy stuff, and you can't do nothing about it." Even though Mothra is already trying to fight this other thing. I think it's the same problem I had with all other Mothra or Godzilla fighting flying monsters movies. Is it's tough to show and portray it in a realistic-ish way when you have to use props. to make them feel like, it's a moth, for heaven's sakes. You'd think it'd be a little less stiff. But of course, time, budget, all that stuff. You got to balance that in. Uh, I do like the references to Indiana Jones are fun. Um, I love Batra's larva design. It's probably one of my favorites. It's very 90s, very kind of hard rock esque, jagged edges, reds, the yellows, and the blacks. It looks really cool. I don't like the evolved version as much. The bat when it's fully grown Batra, but definitely the larva form is super sick looking to me for some reason. I don't know why. It's one of my favorites of this era. Overall, it's fun. It's definitely not as fun as Godzilla versus Ghidorah. That's why I feel like Ghidorah would be kind of up here, because it's really wacky and out there, but not quite Biolante-esque. And Batra, oh man. Okay, I think it's pretty fair. We'll put Godzilla vs. Mothra in B tier for now, and I may change that later. Uh, I am going to change this one, however. I'm going to move you down here so we can stop overloading B. Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2. Now, the name is a little deceiving because they basically were trying to make it connected to this one in name, but it's not. It has nothing to do with that movie. I think the poster is once again misleading because the poster made Mechagodzilla look way different and, in my opinion, way cooler. It looked way, way cooler than the poster, whereas this one kind of feels like, I think another YouTuber I saw recently noticed. It looks more like a toy. And I'm sure that's exactly what they were going for. They want to sell these as toys. That's kind of the point. Because even if the movie sales aren't great, the merchandise after the fact, it makes up for it. So that being said, I really do like this movie. I love Rodan's redesign. I like that they embraced the dinosaur-esque era, the 90s with Jurassic Park and all that, dinosaur craze. And so they really, really went into that, making Baby Godzilla look kind of like a raptor-ish thing. I like I said, I like this movie. Mechagodzilla is a little stiff, but I also know that because of the production, they didn't want to move him that much because it was really expensive to make, and they didn't want to break it. Not expensive, I'm sorry. It was very fragile. The suit was very fragile, so they didn't want to break it until they were closer to done filming. But this is the number one out of all the movies that Godzilla shows up the most in. And I feel like that makes it way higher than most. Way, way higher. So I think A tier for Mechagodzilla is pretty dang fair. I think I'd be happy showing. It's so tough because it's hard because it's all one continuous plot. Yeah, we'll do that. A tier for Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla 2. That's a very good spot for it. Now, a lot of people say that this is the low point for the Heisei era, Godzilla versus Space Godzilla, and I don't think so. I came in watching this movie with a very open mind. I had never saw it before. Only watched it for the first time recently, and I really liked it. I I loved Baby Godzilla's design. Um, I liked how they made him a little cuter. Obviously, they're trying to do it for toys and selling for kids and all that jazz. I love Space Godzilla. I think his design is super cool. I don't know why. I like the big giant crystals. I like that he controls them. I like that he's actually kind of evil and has evil intent, not just a destructive force. Like, for heaven's sakes, he steals, or sorry, not steals, he kidnaps Baby Godzilla and holds him hostage. Like, when has a monster ever taken Godzilla's kid to use against him in a malicious way? Like, hardly ever. Um, so I feel like this one is definitely higher on the list for me for a lot of those reasons. I like the fights. I like the crystal-ish thing that Space Godzilla does. I like that he's a little bit eviler. Obviously, there's some downsides. The biggest downside is the intro with the flight sequence with Mogura and Space Godzilla, and it's very rough because you can tell they were running out of money, and it literally looked like one of these Showa era style movies where they just cut budget so much they just ran out of time. Um, let's see. Do I think it's better than Godzilla versus Mecha? Sorry. Let's see. Do I like it better than Godzilla versus King Ghidorah? Do I like it better than this one? That's a toughie. If I were to do, let's see. I don't know if this one would be. See, that's the thing. A tier would be including ones. Oh, I guess I have my own personal list of things that I would show people. And I guess that's the point of this, right? I'm trying to show what would I would care to show people. Ah, that's really hard. Oh, that's hard. Okay. Man, I really do like it a little bit better than, but I like Space King. Oh boy, this is really hard. Do I like it better than this one? Kinda not. Okay, these are kind of the same tier for me. We'll just do that. We'll say it's about B tier for Space. Oh, for Space Godzilla. I definitely like it a little bit better than Mothra versus Batra, but that's again just my opinion. Flying animals, unless it's CGI, is really hard to do. And now for the movie that gave me cold chills and almost made me cry the first time I watched it. Godzilla vs. Destroya. Now, for those of you who don't know, this was supposed to be Godzilla's last movie. The plan was for Toho to take the Godzilla franchise, wrap it up in a nice bow, give it to the US, and let them make the movies, and let Toho basically reap the benefits. And this was supposed to be Godzilla's swan song. And by this point, a lot of the original people from 1954 had started to either pass away, um, mostly pass away. I believe this particular movie in particular was the last movie that the composer from the original 1954 movie would ever make. Oh, what's his name? I just said it a minute ago. Akira Ifukube. And you can definitely hear in the song, in the music, the way he wrote it, you can feel how it's almost like he's writing his own death or composing for his own death. Like that's how hard and heavy this movie hits you. Now, that being said, there are definitely still some goofy-ish bits and other movie references to it. It definitely pulls more into like the Alien franchise. Destroya is heavily influenced by that, especially in its many different forms, except for when he's in his final form. And boy, it's literally just if Satan and Godzilla had a baby, and that's what Destroya is. And I mean, like he's bigger, he's stronger, he's more pointy, jagged, like spikes and bat wings and everything all over the place. Destroya is awesome. And on top of that, of all things, he's not even the big problem. Since this is supposed to be Godzilla's last movie, I'm putting air quotes, last movie, literally, Godzilla is about to explode from being over irradiated from the last movie, where, which one was that? Where, I believe, was it when Rodan gave him? Yeah, Rodan had given him superpower charge from when he died in Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, and he started to slowly lose control as he gained more and more power. And so Godzilla is literally melting down in one of my favorite designs as Burning Godzilla, and it is awesome. Love Burning Godzilla. And I'm sure if anybody who's seen these movies knows the craziness that these suit actors went through to try to do all this stuff. Like, I don't remember the suit actor's name at the time, at this point, but he had almost died from suffocation from the smoke being used to pour out of Godzilla's suit, getting stuck inside of his suit and literally almost suffocating him to death. Um, Now, that being said, I'm going to go on a very short side tangent. I've not mentioned the suit actors who played these roles. Each and every one of them, I wish I could remember their names a little better. I don't have their names on hand, or else I would say them by name. But without them, we could not have these movies. So for any of you who have the time, go and look up their names, learn about their lives, and, you know, just be appreciative for the time that they put in to make our childhoods possible. Back from my side tangent, Godzilla vs. Destroya. This is the swan song. It is supposed to be the final one. It is supposed to be. They made a huge deal about this movie, right? Being the last Godzilla movie. Heck, they even, as part of the advertisement, had a funeral for him, right? It's crazy. That being said, it wasn't. We know that now. But that'll be explained in the next two movies. For me, Godzilla vs. Destroya is by far one of my favorites. It is the favorite of the Heisei era. Sorry, that's not where it should be. It is definitely. Do I think? Yeah, this is dang near S tier. It's definitely not better than the first one. I'm going to put it at the high A tier for me. Godzilla vs. Destroya is definitely the peak of the Heisei era. It is awesome. It's the first one, especially when Godzilla melts down. It just brings you, it want either cold chills or wants to bring you to tears because it's just so sad. And especially knowing that Akira Ifukube wrote the music for that as if it was his own funeral march, it's kind of nuts. Um, so in history of this so far, by this point, Toho had wanted to stop for a while, give the reins over to the U.S., right? And that's where we come to the movie that I grew up with. This is what I had. This is what introduced me to Godzilla. This and the other ones I've mentioned so far introduced it to me. A lot of you will rank this next one extremely low, but I will probably rank it a lot higher than most simply because of nostalgia's sake. And that is the 1998 Godzilla American version from TriStar. Now, like I said, this particular movie was my childhood. I literally had a birthday cake with a little miniature Godzilla of this Godzilla climbing a building on it. Like, that's how much this one played a big role in my life. When I wanted to watch a movie, a Godzilla movie, this is usually the one I reach for because this is what I had. And then maybe, Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, then maybe All Monsters Attack or Godzilla's Revenge, and then maybe Godzilla vs. Biollante, but it was mostly 98 and Mechagodzilla for sure. Now, after watching this and comparing it to the other Godzilla movies, I understand everyone's criticisms about it. I understand that it's not really. They definitely, as somebody once put it, I don't remember who made the quote, they took the god out of Godzilla, right? They made him less scary. They turned him into an animal. He doesn't actually breathe fire, which I didn't know as a kid. It looked like he breathed fire, or atomic breath or whatever. But it was fish burps, and like I can see where the argument is, and in a lot of ways I agree with them for sure. The beginning of the movie, it definitely feels like an old Godzilla movie. Him puncturing the side of the fish boat, the mysterious buildup. Nyctotopolis was a little bit of a rough for me, especially as a kid. It was just, I was not interested in the human parts again at all. But boy, when Godzilla first shows up, it's fun. But then as I got to be an adult, I started to see, oh, wait a minute, he's just running away. He's not actually destroying things. But as a kid, I still liked the fact that he was on the screen and he was cool. And then I think, especially as a kid, for me, the hardest part was seeing him just die in a very kind of anticlimactic way by just a few missiles from jets. Like, I think they could have wrote that a little better. Now, that being said, I finally got my hands on the original Godzilla 1998, the series, the TV series, and I think that does him way more justice, and in my opinion, would raise, if it was based on that alone, it would probably be up there in A tier. Um, that being said, I definitely think that this one, oof, that's tough. That's tough, tough. Especially because I'm playing in nostalgia mixed with what I have seen now. I think if it was based on what I was a kid, it would definitely be A or B tier for sure. But comparing it to others, I'd probably say low C. And I know a lot of people would say F and just get it over with. But I think low C is pretty fair for me because I'm balancing the nostalgia with, okay, I can see it's not really a quote unquote, it's just Zilla at this point. And now, because of what people call this abomination, Toho saw it and was like, well, we don't want to make our cohorts at TriStar really upset by basically saying the movie that they based our monster on sucks. So they're like, we'll just take the reins back and make our own Godzilla movie again. And so we get to the other movie I had watched growing up, which was Godzilla Millennium or Godzilla 2000. And after watching this one again recently, it's still pretty fun. I like Godzilla's design. It's very, very 90s. Um, all the spikes, the jagged edges, the points, the you know sharp, like you're gonna stab yourself if you look at him funny. I like his design. I like the story to a point. One thing that I always thought I didn't like I really did not like as a kid, is that it took way, way too long for him to fight the alien. Like it was so like yeah, when it kept cutting back to the alien, like the ship, and then Godzilla fighting a ship, and then Godzilla fighting a kind of alien thing, and then finally a guy in a monster suit that is Orga shows up and fights him, and is very short lived. And I was a little disappointed with that as a kid because I loved Godzilla and I loved seeing him fight other monsters, but he didn't. I feel like they kind of had a letdown for this movie for that point. Now that being said, I really like the uh, the antagonist of the movie. I think he's funny, over the top, and a little goofy. I don't remember the actor's name or the character, but it's still pretty fun. So if I were to rank this one, do I like it more or less than, let's see. I think a fair place to put this, because I'm keeping nostalgia in mind, but it also wasn't my favorite as a kid. It was definitely lower than All Monsters Attack for me. Like I said, for me. I think we're gonna put this in low B. I think that's pretty fair. Leave it right there, because all these, I still, like I said, a lot of these are still good movies to me. A lot of them are. I'm just trying to keep in mind a bunch of other factors all while I'm doing this. Now we're going to move on to Godzilla vs. Megaguirus. After watching this one, again, I still like the design. I like the story. I think this one, in some ways, does it better than Godzilla Millennium or Godzilla 2000. In some ways, not so much. Some of the CGI and computer technology they started to use was a little rough in some spots, especially when Megaguirus has to fly fast. It's a little goofy looking, but part of me, I definitely feel it's better than Millennium because there's a lot more monster action going on. Do I like it better than Godzilla Returns? I want to say yes. So I think that's pretty fair. Um, it's hard for me to rank the Millennium ones higher, especially these two. Well, not especially these two, but just these two in general, because I love the Heisei series so much. It's really hard to move them past the Heisei series, so I think that one's fair where it's at right now. I may have to move some stuff down, but now we're going to get to my favorite of the Heisei era. First, or not Heisei, I'm sorry. My favorite of the Millennium era, and that is GMK. Godzilla, uh, Mothra, King Ghidorah, All Monsters Attack. This one, I feel they should have went with. I really, really, really think they could have continued a really good series if they would have kept this. Whoever wrote, directed, and the vision they had for this particular movie was just on point. If I remember correctly, the director from the '90s Gamera trilogy is the one who came in and did this, and you can definitely tell he did a lot more with the money he had than I think 2000 and Megaguirus. So if I were to rank this one, do I think it is better or worse than Destroya? Oh, that's a tough one. Oh, I don't think it's better or worse. Then I think they're tied. See, and I'm gonna put it lower in the A tier, simply because they're just tied to me. I feel like this one has a much more impact, but this one is peak Millennium for me. This is my favorite by far. Um, I love the different take on Godzilla. I like that he's not so much. They changed it from him being an atomic created monster to, oh, we're going into spiritual aspects and that he's the spirits of those that were killed by the Japanese in World War II and seeking revenge on those who have forgotten about, the war and try to forget about it. Like, I love that they turned King Ghidorah into a good guy. That was a very interesting change. I love Baragon, especially if you watch the behind the scenes. It's hilarious seeing the first, I believe, female suit actress for a Godzilla movie. Uh, she's very, very funny. If you haven't seen the YouTube videos or anything on it, you should. She was told, to move the mouth of Baragon while she was acting, but she would add in her own little roar, and it's stinking adorable. And I love Baragon in this movie. Mothra's fine, nothing too crazy with those. But I do love that I love the design of Godzilla. One critique about his design is that he looks like he's got a buffalo hump right where his shoulders are. I don't know if that's on purpose or if that was just for practicality for the suit actor. I don't know. Other than that, love the design. Love that he's crazy evil. Love the fact that they kind of changed the formula a little bit, and I think they did a good job, and that he should have kept going with it, but they didn't for some reason. And then I think now that we're going to go to the next movie, this one I feel is my second favorite for sure in the Millennium era of the series, and that's Godzilla versus or against Mechagodzilla. This is by far, and probably many others agree, favorite Mechagodzilla design. It is hands down the best looking one to me. I love the design. I like the story. If I were to rank this one, I would probably, now I'm keeping in mind nostalgia, probably put it right there. It is high A for me. Like if I were to show anybody any Godzilla movies, it'd be Probably these right here, right to here, and then all the rest of these are kind of, we can skip them if we need to. Um, yeah, I think that's fair. Perfect. So Godzilla against Mechagodzilla is super fun. I love Kiryu. I like the female lead and her story arc going from, the typical, hey, I got another soldier killed and I have to have a redemption, and she eventually does after getting picked on by her cohorts, but she turns around and they eventually respect her and stuff. I really like this movie. Godzilla's design is, once again, it's good. There are some aspects that aren't my favorite, but I couldn't tell you off the top of my head why. I just know it's not as cool, I would say, as the GMK Godzilla, except for the buffalo hump. But definitely not as cool as Burning Godzilla. But I don't know, it's kind of tough. Um, let's see. Yeah, so Godzilla against Mechagodzilla is definitely my second favorite in the Millennium Era. Now, that being said, Godzilla, Mothra, Mechagodzilla, Tokyo SOS, when I watched them back to back, I felt a little let down about where they took the story. The lead character from the last movie is non-existent. Um, the dad and the little girl from this movie, who the dad's trying to befriend and or possibly have a love interest for the main uh, protagonist for Godzilla against Mechagodzilla isn't in this movie, and they go off to someone else. And I think it made it a little less interesting for me when the humans decided to show up. So I feel like this one would probably be. Do I like it more? No, I definitely don't like it more than that one. Definitely don't like it more than that one. Yeah, that's fair. Definitely B tier for me. I think it was just a dip, a slight dip in quality, maybe in change in the story. That it could have been right here, but they decided to go against it for some whatever reason. Uh, yeah, that's fair. B tier is fair for that. Now for the movie that has split many a fans, many fans of this whole series, and that is Godzilla Final Wars. Um, to make sure I had my opinion right, I watched this thing twice. And the first time, I'm like, yeah, I get what they were trying to do. They were trying, the director, I believe he'd only done like one or two movies before this one. He was trying to do a swan song again of Godzilla actually going into retirement for a while, and he was trying to play on the movies that he liked as a kid, and that was a lot of the show era stuff. So I get the goofiness they were going for. I get what they were trying to do. I understand that the Matrix was huge at this point. And that really influenced the human storylines. And that being said, I love the Matrix, and after watching this twice, I have a pretty definitive stance on what I feel about this movie. Um, way too many human parts. Too much human parts for a movie that's supposed to be Godzilla's final one for like the next 10 years or the unforeseeable future at that point. Not enough screen time for monsters. I think Ebera, for heaven's sakes, had more screen time than some other ones. And it's a freaking giant lobster, for heaven's sakes. Now, that being said, I love the monster fights when they finally decided to show up. Um, let's see. Where would I put this? This might be very divisive to some people. I would rank this a heck of a lot higher if the human parts were written better and there was more monster screen time. I'm going to put this one at low D, teetering on F. Mostly because if they had just cut out the dang human parts and stuffed in more of the monsters, I would have been happy because, like, that's the whole point. The whole point of this is it's a giant swan song of Godzilla, and yet he hardly has any screen time. And that's like, oh, it really, really grinds my gears, as Griffin would say. Um, it's it's so tough. Where to? Yeah, I think that may move, but I think I'm going to leave it there for now, and we're going to move on to the 10-year point after this movie, and that's when Godzilla finally hit theaters again with Godzilla 2014. It was back in America's hands, and I don't even remember where I saw this movie or when I saw it first. If I saw it in theaters or when we had it on DVD. Honestly, I don't remember. But after watching it again recently, I am once again of the same opinion. I didn't mind the human aspect. I think I understand the director's vision. I understand he was trying to make it a little bit more realistic with the angles and the shots being more focused on the human part and kind of a disaster movie with monster aspects kind of trickled in the background. But again, it's the same problem that I have with all the rest of them. Way too many human parts and not enough of the big G man showing up in the movie. That being said, how do I feel about it compared to others? I like, a lot of people didn't like his design. Part of me does like his design. I always thought, at least when I first saw it, his feet looked weird because it looked like a giant elephant foot. But I'm sure that's exactly what they were going for, because I mean that's what elephants are. I mean that's how they stand, is they have giant, basically tree trunks. Where would I rank this one? Do I like it better than these? In some ways, yes. In some ways, no. Oh, this is getting hard. I think if I were to place Godzilla 2014, it's definitely not above these two. I love the Heisei era way more than this one, for sure. Now, I'm basing it solely off this one, not the universe that it eventually turned into. This one, I think middle B tier is fair. I think that is a very fair spot to put it in. I'm going to move you down to here. Let's see. I'm keeping in mind Millennium, Godzilla Millennium, for nostalgia's sake. I still like this one a little bit better. I like this one definitely better. So maybe what I'll do that to try to leave a little bit more gap in the B rank, because we still have a few movies to go through. Now for the next movie I'm going to go over is the 2016 Shin Godzilla. When Toho finally brought the Big G back to their studio and made a movie. I remember watching this for the first time once. And my first guttural reaction was, this is a weird movie. Godzilla design is a little weird, is a little out there, but I also didn't know the context of the movie. I didn't know the political messaging, because they were really, really going back to the Godzilla 1954 roots with this one. The director, oh boy, what's his name? He created the Evangelion franchise. I just can't remember his name. Anyways, he really, really, really did a good job reinventing kind of Godzilla in a new light. He is kind of a monster born from tragedy again. There's political messaging, and in the sense of poking at the government's, what do you call it, inability to act because of the nuclear disasters that had happened from a tsunami I believe back in like 2011, 2012, I think. I don't remember the dates very well. Like I said, I've read about all this stuff once and I forgot about it. But when I watched it the first time, I thought Godzilla design's a little weird. The story's a little weird with all these meetings. But then after I did the research and I actually bought the movie and I sat through and watched it again, it is there's so much more to it than you think. Um, the human bits are a little boring, and that's actually on purpose because it's critiquing the Japanese government at the time for their inadequacy in trying to actually help people from the, I want to say Fukushima disaster, nuclear disaster, and they were basically saying, look, this is what the government did. All these dang formalities and meetings to have a meeting and a meeting to have that meeting is ridiculous, right? And that's kind of what they were doing with it, while also envisioning the Evangelion director's vision of a monster who is born out of tragedy. He's literally just trying to adapt to the world around him as he just constantly is in pain and agony, bleeding from every orifice, puking up blood. Like, if just for anybody who's, by the way, has kids, I would suggest you skip this one for now. It's much more of an adult-focused Godzilla movie for sure. Kids probably won't enjoy it and or like it at all, but I don't know. You know your kids better than I do. Um, Godzilla is very destructive. He is a force of nature. He really encapsulates the name of Shin Godzilla for sure. Um, and I really, really, really liked where they could have gone with it if they would have let the director do as he wanted in making Godzilla continue to evolve and to grow and to change, to potentially get wings, to potentially split into more versions of himself, to at the very end, a lot of people say it's a divisive scene. In my opinion, I liked where the director would have gone with it, in that Godzilla would have split off, evolving into the next thing to defend himself, right? So, like, the whole point of this movie, he's constantly evolving and changing against the things that keep hurting him, right? So, the pressures of the ocean, right? He can't take it anymore, and he comes up on land, right? Then the land, he's too heavy, he can't stand, so then he evolves so that way he can stand. But then while he's big on land, he realizes, oh, the water is was cooling me down. I'm getting too hot. I got to go back to the ocean. Then he adapts again to be able to stand up on land again, and to be able to withstand the sun and not get too hot. And he adapts to fight planes, fight tanks, fight buildings, fight um, bombs being dropped on him. Like, he adapts each time, right? And as he's adapting, new things happen. His tail, all of a sudden, he can shoot with. He can shoot laser beams out of his back. He can shoot, stuff out of his mouth, like normal. But the director was trying to say that he would keep adapting to the next thing that would hurt him. And since humans were the ones that were dominating him and causing him the most amount of pain, he was eventually going to adapt into humans to wipe them out. And so that's the end scene of the whole movie, spoiler alert, when then this tail starts to branch off and you see all these little Godzilla hominid things, splitting off the tail, right? And I really wish I could have seen more of what the director wanted to do with this movie, because it was that good. Once I understood the story he was trying to tell, and the messaging behind it, the implications to the nuclear disaster, and the critique of the Japanese government, it is a very, very good movie. It is not kid friendly in the sense of it'd probably be very boring to most. It's going to go higher. But this one is right, tied with, in my opinion. It is tied with the original for sure, because it is a modern take. This is when the Toho decided to go full CGI with him. So yeah, I think that's a fair place for him. If any of you have any disagreements with that, like I always say, leave a comments in the comments below. What can I say about the anime trilogy? Not much. I liked what they were trying to do, but if I'm going to be, I liked Godzilla's design. I like, again, they were trying something different. It was just all very, very, very boring. And I think these three movies, right there. And we're gonna move on to Godzilla King of the Monsters 2019. And it's funny, after doing some research, I did not know that this one didn't do as well in the box office as they thought it would, which is nuts because they have all of the, like, some of the biggest monsters in Toho's arsenal. Rodan, Mothra, King Ghidorah, and Godzilla all in one movie with an American budget. But if I remember correctly, it had to go up against a couple of other big movies at the time. That's why it didn't do well, like Avengers or something. But I don't remember. Like I said, it's been a while since I've looked at it. I definitely like this one way more than Godzilla 2014. It was way better. I love King Ghidorah's design in this. It is awesome. King Ghidorah in this is what I always wanted him to be like. I envisioned him being gigantic, scary, an alien that is straight evil, like actually evil with evil intent. And I've read like the novelization of this movie, and I think it does a better job with the human aspects for sure than the movie does. But obviously, because it's a book, they have the leniency and the time to be able to actually put towards the humans, so you actually care. That being said, the human aspect is a little rough for the movie itself. So it's definitely up there in terms of like the monster fighting and stuff, but the human aspects has some rough edges. Do I think it's better than? That's so tough. It's so tough. Okay, let's do this. We're gonna move you guys right here. Nope. Yes, right there. We'll do that, and then move some of these around. Nope. Yes. Move you down here. Yeah, that'll work. Ha! That's funny. It's a nice little bell curve. All right. So Godzilla 2019. Do I think it's necessarily A tier? Oh, it is teetering on the edge, man. If they wrote it just a little bit better for the human parts, it would definitely be A for me. So I'm gonna put this one high B. I think that's a fair place for this. I think that's where it should be, because the soundtrack is awesome. I like how they were starting to expand on the MonsterVerse with this movie, with the last one. I think Kong Skull Island, for sure, is better than this one, but that's just because the human aspect's a little bit better than this. But yeah, I think Godzilla 2019 is a fair place to put that. Now, moving on to the next movie, Godzilla vs. Kong. What's funny about this one is I, obviously, like everyone else in the world, is during the pandemic. I don't even remember like seeing any commercials for this because I was working so much. I wasn't really. I hadn't been into Godzilla for quite some time, like I was, especially considering this one. But 2019 and 2021 were weird years for me because 2019 was the year that I had first got married We weren't able to go out a lot because we were trying to scrimp and save money where we could. Uh, and then by 2021, when Godzilla vs. Kong came out, I mean, movie theaters were shut down. I mean, everything was kind of bonkers for some people, and lots of people had lost family members and loved ones, which is very tragic. But for me, what's weird is that I was in this weird bubble. Me and my wife, we had both worked at a call center. We were both considered like, um, what do you call it? Essential workers. So, and because we were in a call center, we couldn't wear masks because it would muffle us when we tried to use the microphones. So, for like almost a year and a half, 2 years, or however long COVID was, it didn't bother us. And by this point, HBO Max was pretty new. It hadn't been changed to Max yet, and I got to watch it for the first time on Max because I didn't, we just couldn't go out and see it in the movie theaters because we just didn't quite have the money for it. But when I watched it, man, oh man, I loved this movie. That being said, the human aspects, once again, are very rough. But they definitely got feedback from the last movie in that there was too much human part and not enough monster action, and they went all in on the monster action with this one, and very like bare minimum, bare bones human aspect, which a lot of people may have appreciated more. I just feel like there's a way you can find a balance between the two to have a good human story and a good monster story in the same movie. Now, that being said, I love the fight sequences. I love Kong's story arc. I love all the references to the original Godzilla versus King Kong, or King Kong versus Godzilla. I love, let's see, I love Godzilla's fight with him. I think one downside for sure was Mechagodzilla's design. It's definitely not my favorite. Well, we already talked about this. It's Kiryu from Godzilla against Mechagodzilla. That one is my favorite design. I feel like they could have done that differently, but I understand what they were trying to go for. So, with all that in mind, I feel that Godzilla vs. Kong is only kind of slightly better than like these two. If I could put them like right next to each other, I would. Godzilla vs. Kong and Godzilla 2019. I would put these almost side by side to me. They're neck and neck. If they would just make the human stories a little bit better, I would have bumped it up to here. Oh, poo. But I would also show these. A would also include poo. We're gonna move them. We're gonna put you here. We'll do that. There we go. They're A tier. Yeah, that's fair. Godzilla vs. Kong and Godzilla 2019. If I could put them side by side, like not one above the other, I would, and that's where I'm going to keep them. I don't even want to get into this, as it's so awful. Godzilla Singular Point. I watched the entire thing, and I kept wondering to myself, when's Godzilla going to show up? And it was like 15 episodes or something that are like 50 minutes, 45 minutes, 50 minutes a piece. I don't remember exactly the number, but I'll just put it this way. It felt way too long. And then by the time he finally showed up, it made no sense because they went way too much into, they went way too heavy into the physics and the astrophysics, and like it just was way too out there. Way too out there. I liked Godzilla's design. I liked how they took from Shin Godzilla to Evolved. I think the highlight of this whole thing was Jet Jaguar finally showing up again after like, I don't know, 50 years. But that being said, it was not enough to redeem this series for me. F. It's definitely an F. Now we're on to the next series, and that is Monarch. which kind of ties in with Godzilla Minus One because it came out around the same time. So keep that in mind. Monarch, oh boy, you can definitely tell it's an Apple produced show. Very. Hello, everyone. Sorry about that interruption. My thing decided to give up on recording almost towards the end. So just want to do a quick update on where we're at so far. We were talking about Godzilla, the Monarch TV series. So for this one, I watched the whole thing through with my wife, and as another YouTuber that I watch, Critical Drinker, says a lot, his reviews, it is very, very heavy on, in parentheses, the message. They really kind of poop on any sort of man leadership, which, if you've been paying attention to any of this entire tier list, I have no problem when a female is a lead, like in Godzilla against Mechagodzilla. It's, again, one of my favorite movies of this entire genre. Not genre, sorry, of this entire series. But when you have poor writing to accompany that and basically just have people be girl bosses just 'cause, without a good story arc, without any sort of redemption, without any sort of climbing up a heroic ladder, overcoming obstacles, overcoming shortcomings, like becoming a better person, like it doesn't matter. Bad writing's bad writing, period. And I feel like that's what this show suffers a lot about, is they focused once again way too much on the humans. Way too much. And then all of a sudden, now people who go to Hollow Earth are time travelers. Like, it breaks the continuity of the entire series, because, like, what happened when, in Godzilla vs. Kong, when the dude, shoot, what are those things called? When they flew the ship down with Kong to go check out Hollow Earth and to find the power source that would fuel Mechagodzilla, he brought down the Iwi kid, I believe it's Iwi, I think, who was deaf, and then her adopted mother, and then the one science dude who had the theory about Hollow Earth. Like, if they all of a sudden were able to go down into Hollow Earth and then come back and not, like, any time has passed, what in the hell were the Monarch people who wrote, the writers of Monarch? Where did that come from? Did they not watch the last movie? Like, all of a sudden people can time travel when they go to Hollow Earth? I don't think so. It's not a teleportation device that takes them to another planet, unless that's what they're going for, in which case, oh boy. But again, I just feel like the human aspects were just so boring. Like, the relationship with the brother, the Japanese brother, and his unknown half-sister, and then the black girl, I can't remember her name, like, she was, like, you know, it was just not that interesting because they're making her out to be this mysterious side character, and we don't know anything about her, but then it's like, oh, but she's, you know, part of the Apex company, and yet somehow she befriends the same dude son who is a part of Monarch. Like, it feels very reminiscent to a lot of these old Showa era movies where, like, somehow Scooby-Doo and the gang are able to come together and, you know, solve mysteries, but it takes a worldwide phenomenon and then shrinks it down too much. Like, they make a worldwide event feel very focused on the same group of people over and over again, and I just feel like that's one of the big reasons it pulls from this. or it makes it so low on my list. And even lower still is the fact that they still would not show monsters throughout the entire series. They would always leave them as slight cliffhangers at the very end of each episode, and it drove me bonkers because I wanted to see actual fights. And then when Godzilla finally shows up, oh, like half a second, maybe a minute, and the very final finale fight, barely a minute, maybe 2 minutes at most. It drove me just batty. It was awful. Like, I wish they would have just skipped this and went to the movie because it's so meh. Now that being said, luckily Toho had their game on, and last, I believe it was November, they released Godzilla -1. I would, I do have to say, I was so happy, so happy about this movie. I was just ecstatic that we were even getting it in theaters. Like, that's the crazy part. I don't even think Shin Godzilla, if it did get in the U.S. theaters, it was so limited, it barely had any viewings. But for some reason, Godzilla -1 had a giant U.S. release. And boy, it kicked off with a bang. Like, the movie is the first one, in my opinion, that balanced the monster action with a good human character drama. I thoroughly enjoyed the movie, the characters, and the human part so much, I didn't even notice, I didn't care that Godzilla wasn't on screen until he showed up. That's how well they balanced the two. Now, that being said, after the third time watching it within about a 2 or 3 week period, by the third time I had learned the story, I knew what was going on with the humans. That by the third time I was like, yeah, I wish I could have seen more of the Big G in the movie. But upon the first watch, the first time, no opinions, no anything. I thought it was a very well balanced monster movie with a very good human driven drama. The director and the writers and the whole team for that movie did such a good job. For anybody who doesn't know, that they literally won an Oscar for this movie. Now, is it the best international film? No, of course not. They wouldn't. Hollywood's too good for that. But at least they won something, and something that they well deserved, and that was the VFX. Considering how tiny of a budget this movie actually had, they have done better than I think most Hollywood movies now with a $500 million budget. And that's saying something, that sometimes less is more, especially if you can use it efficiently. So, do I wish that this movie would have got a way more awards? Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad that Japan at least recognizes this, considering that it gave all the awards for the Japanese Academy Awards or whatever. Got Best Picture, Best Director, Best this, Best that. I'm like, yeah, it deserved it. But in the U.S., it just got Best Visual Effects, which is kind of like here. We recognize that you did something good, even though they clearly deserved way more. I think at minimum Best International Feature for sure. But that being said, this movie, if I were to show any three Godzilla movies, like the top of the top, it would be the original, Shin, and Godzilla -1. These three movies are peak. Especially, I would almost, okay, and I've said this before in a couple of videos, that Godzilla -1 and Godzilla 1954 are tied, and Godzilla -1 is almost above, in my opinion, simply because they did such a good job modernizing the story, allowing the character to be scary again. Like, the island scene when he first shows up was extremely unexpected. Half the time you're sitting there waiting for almost an hour for Godzilla to show up. Boy, they don't hold back. He shows up really fast and honestly very well. And I love the story of the kamikaze pilot and the way they wrote it, how he's dealing with survivor's guilt, PTSD, trauma from seeing his comrades die, um, coming home, finding out his family's gone, literally by himself, trying to pick up the pieces after the World War II, and how it's a shame that he didn't actually die for his country, doing suicide, plane dive bombings or whatever, and how seeing that story arc of his come from just the lowest pits of hell, and Godzilla's kind of like a ghost story in the background, always in the background of his mind, causing him some sort of traumatic incident and memory of the things that happened to him during the war, and then how he finds some hope in finding a family, but he doesn't believe he deserves it, and then he wants to redeem himself by completing his mission in the first place, but then everybody's like, no, we're not. Obviously life was cheap during the war. We spent lives too frivolously, like, let's fight to live this time. And it just is so good. And some of the visuals, especially on Godzilla himself, are just so good for the budget they had. It is absurd how they got it to look that good with so little money. Like, if that isn't a lesson to Hollywood, I don't know what is. Like, if you can do that with $15 million, like, why are we spending $500 million on movies? It is insanity. It makes no sense. But that's my side rant. Godzilla -1, S tier. I would almost rank it above 1954, but I don't, simply because it's the original. Shin and -1 are, I would say honestly, that Shin is, like, if I were to put these in 1, 2, and 3, first, second, third place, it'd be the original, -1, and then Shin. But these are all kind of tied to me. They're all in the same category. Shin only slightly less because the human aspect is just a little boring. Now to finish off the tier list is the new Godzilla movie. I have not seen it. It's not come out yet. I will probably come back and review it and then put it somewhere in this tier list. But for now, I have a feeling, based on the movie trailers and everything else, it'll probably be tied with Godzilla vs. Kong and Godzilla King of the Monsters 2019. I feel like it's going to be tied with these. So just so anybody who's looking at this knows, like, I don't think these three are one above the other. They're all kind of equal to me, especially because I don't know this one yet, so that's why I'm sandwiching it between all these. So I think, yeah, that's a pretty good summary of the list that I have so far. These are the three that I would absolutely recommend any single person to watch. They're not kid-friendly. These ones are the darker in tone, but they portray the message of Godzilla very to the point. He's a plot device to help send a message, right? I would say any of these movies in the A tier, and I would say I would include Right to Here in the B tier. I would be happy showing anyone. I might, we're gonna do that. Any of these, I would feel happy showing anyone. This one is way higher than I think most people would think. All Monsters Attack. That's just because it's what I had. It's what I grew up with. I didn't know. And honestly, I kind of like that it sums up the other movies a little bit, because, like, Ebera, it's in there. Mogura from this one is in here. Kamakiris from there is in here. Like, I don't know. I don't want to try to justify myself any more than I think for nostalgia's sake, this is where it is for me. This will probably change as I continue to watch them and rewatch them. I may revisit this, especially after Godzilla X Kong, and try and redo it again. But I'm pretty confident where I have everything. These are definitely F. These are definitely D. Those are probably C. This one might be higher. I don't know. But I think all that is pretty fair where we're at right now. So again, thank you for tuning in to The Traveling Merchant. If you enjoyed this or would like to see other videos similar to this, please like,